Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire, the Leadership Development Podcast, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, Aspire listeners, I have a treat for you because I have a fantastic leader that we're about to talk about, Andy Jacks. He is doing so much in education, and I'm so pumped to not only talk about his new book, but also all the many projects that he's got going on. Andy, thank you so much for being on the Aspire podcast.
Yeah, man, I appreciate being here. You got a great thing going. I'm just happy to be part of it. So, I know you're working hard, and we all are, and glad to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, so I'm chomping at the bit to talk about your book. It's fantastic. But before we do that, will you just kind of introduce yourself to my listeners and share a little bit about your leadership journey?
Sure. I'm Andy Jacks. First and foremost, I'm a dad. I got 3 kids and, family, wife, and all that stuff. That's, just like a lot of us, that's the forefront of our lives. And it's so important. And I have to say that that's the one thing that over time, I'm sure we're going to meander all over the place in this conversation because that's how I think you and I are going to roll, which is perfect. And this is kind of one of those. I feel like as a parent, you learn so much and it gets so much perspective on patience and expectations and how you relate to people and kids especially. And so, first and foremost, a parent and family man. I have been a principal for this is my 12th year as a school principal. I'm currently a principal at the Noakesville School, which is a kindergarten through 8th grade school in Northern Virginia. It's about 1,200 kids. Before that, I was the principal at Ashland Elementary School, which is pretty close by. At one point, we're about 1,000 kids. So that's a pretty large elementary school.
Yeah.
And before that, assistant principal, 5th grade teacher I started as. I do a lot of work with advocacy with the Autism Society and also work for NESP as a senior fellow and help to lead organizational change as well as like connect school leaders, which especially during these tough times is so important.
You're talking about tough times. Your book. Let's kind of dive in, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man.
So as far as the book goes, I always love hearing origin stories, like where the concept came from before you put pen to paper. So what was it like for you? What was the concept and where did it come from?
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because that gave me the inspiration for not just the book, but for my own change process. Mm-hmm. And I think something that really helped me evolve in a certain way was the angst and the where I thought I was going to go and what I thought I believed didn't match a lot of the actions I was doing. And the more I learned, the more I realized how off I was actually. And if anything, the more I learned, the dumber I felt. Right. And I think that's how it's supposed to be.
Sure.
And so a lot of things kind of converge at the same time. I had a situation where I was, as a school leader, there was awesome things happening in our school. And yet, no matter how fantastic everything was, we were still struggling with some of the most serious and very difficult behavioral situations with students. And sometimes there's one student, and that's what happens in a lot of our schools. I know now it's different because of COVID. You have a lot of behavioral things going on, but even before COVID, we did too. And it could be one student that would throw the whole school upside down. And we were just stuck. And no matter what I said about trying to go after every kid and make sure that every child is successful, you got stuck on those situations. And then that led to other difficult situations. And so there's a little bit of that going on. And I didn't have answers for these people, right? I would say like, okay, we need to do better for this one kid. They'd be like, all right, Andy, how? And I'd be like, oh man, you got me. And so I had to learn, I had to research. And so I was also at the same time going through my doctorate program, Virginia Tech. And my professor was really pushing me. Dr. Glenn was pushing me on what topic I was going to look into. And the one thing on one side, they say when you do a dissertation don't like try to create this like monumental piece of work. Yeah. At the end of the day, they say a great dissertation is a finished dissertation. You got to get this sucker done. But it's really important to pick a topic that you're passionate about so that when you're doing all this research, you can enjoy it and sort of learn from it. And so that's where I dove into. I dove into this idea of exclusionary discipline, partly because of the struggles we were having in school, partly because of my own upbringing with discipline, partly from seeing kids like my own kid and other kids that were kicked out of school at a very early age, sometimes for things like disabilities. And I realized that there's so many layers to this that I think your average school leader and teacher really don't know enough about.
Mm-hmm.
We talk at a surface level with discipline and just behavioral change, but we're not really taught very well how to do this. We spend so many courses on content, academic content in our undergraduate programs, but by the time you get into, the real work, you're not prepared for the behavioral challenges that we face. And even in schools, what kind of professional development do we provide for our staff? And it shows our priorities. So I really dove into this, and I realized that some of my norms that I had, were not effective, and not based on my opinion, but based on a wealth of knowledge at this point. There is so much research on this topic. So it's not like just a few, interesting articles you could pull out, basically showing that most of the practices like zero tolerance and exclusionary discipline, and there's a place for everything sort of, but the standard operating procedure of this is so ineffective. It has so many bad side effects, yet that's all we really know how to do. And when we don't have that and we take that tool away, we all look at each other and be like, I don't know what else to do.
Yep.
And so as a school, we tried to move past it. And it was hard for us. I worked with amazing people, and I worked with amazing people now that still try to figure out those other solutions. And it led me down these sort of practical tips that we could use. And based on that, that's where I feel like, that's maybe good content for a book that people could read, something motivational on a really hard topic, something that could help us, strive to reach out to those most struggling students, which I believe helps define our school success. It's easy to teach the kids that are easy. It's hard to teach the kids that are hard, but that's also what defines your own personal legacy. If you can catch those kids and reach out to them, and you may not get every single one, but man, I'm going to try. I'm going to try every single day, even if it hurts, because that's sort of where the magic's at. And that's what makes you sleep good at the end of the day. You put it all on the field. You give everything you could. And 9 times out of 10, you do reach those kids. You really do change their lives.
Yeah, for sure. So you start off the book with the meaning behind discipline wins. And I thought that was perfect because, you're looking at this trophy, but then you also have the word discipline, which is has a negative connotation. Yeah, right. And you're like struggling, like discipline wins. Like, I don't even, what is that? Right. So, for someone who's listening to the title or sees your book on the shelf, what is the meaning behind the title Discipline Wins?
Right. We can have success in a tough issue of discipline. Students can and will, and they do improve behaviors. And when it happens, you should celebrate it, because it is like winning the Super Bowl, some of these kids that we're working with. And for them, it is their Super Bowl. It is the win that they need. For so many kids, it's not about the ABCs. It's not about reading and writing and math. It's about trying to sit still in class, trying not to fight with others, having the social skills that'll actually be really helpful in a real job when they get older. And not that content is not important, because of course it is, but there are so many other skills we call these sort of side soft skills or hidden curriculum, and all these things that really need to be more put on the forefront of our skills as adults, because in any job, being able to get along with others, relate, and work in teams, those are the things that you really need. And so part of that is discipline, self-discipline, but also how we help discipline those in our care. And one of the biggest things about discipline is our self-discipline as educators and leaders. It starts with the adults, because that's who we have the most control with, ourselves. We really can't control students. We can just control ourselves. And we really think of this as like a positive mindset that we can be successful. Again, you're more likely to be successful. There's a big chapter in there about this first responder mentality, about this idea that we have self-efficacy, and that our belief system on how we can achieve has a great impact on that achievement. And the more we think of ourselves in that same role, the more likely we actually will be successful at catching those kids. So, I really want it to be more of a celebratory situation, success model, and not just talk about all the negative things that can happen in discipline. And that's honestly where we stop so many times, is we get straight into consequence. And again, and we'll probably talk in that there's a place for consequence. There's a place for all sorts of things, but that cannot be all we talk about. We cannot just stop there. We have to talk about what are these actions that are more likely, based on research, based on evidence, will actually do the thing which you want, which is to improve their behavior, so that the child is happier in school, you're happier in school, you have a good relationship with the child. And that's where you win. When you see those things improve, where you see that you actually have made a difference and the kid can be in class successful, that's the win. I really think you need to throw confetti up in the air. I've had confetti cannons. That's a cool thing you could do. Confetti cannons, blow them up in the air, and just celebrate that moment, because that's the success for that student.
Oh, for sure. And I love the chapter on the root causes piece. I think so often and maybe it's just a time thing, but it's so quick to, like you said, get to the consequence, move on, and just assume that the student is going to magically learn the appropriate behavior and be successful in class, instead of looking at what's the cause. And my thinking with that too is, sometimes people refer to a child as a bad kid, and it's like, no, the behavior was what was bad, right? Not the kid itself. So what is going on deeper in that level? So what is it at your school that you've been doing to try and find the root cause behind the behaviors of your students?
Oh, I think the most important thing is to ask them, especially depending on the age level. One of the coolest things in our school right now is we have 5-year-olds to 14-year-olds, and being able to talk to a student and really get deep as to why they're doing what they're doing. And a lot of times they don't want to talk to you, right? Yeah. Some of these kids have been getting in trouble for a long time. They don't trust you. They don't believe you. Anything you say to them, they think they can get it used against them. And so you got to dig deep, and you have to really, over time, build relationships so they can build just a teeny bit of trust to have a real conversation. And you have to have those conversations, not just when they're in trouble, because like any of us, when we're in trouble, when we have a lot, either chaos in our mind or whatever, we have a tough situation we're trying to go through, it's not necessarily the time we want to be introspective and reflective. And that goes for any of us. So really try to build that over time and dig deeper as to, okay, when this stuff happens, why does that happen? And what could you do instead? And just that conversation doesn't fix it. Because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, Andy, you have a little side conversation with a kid who just threw a chair. It's going to fix everything. No, it won't. But a lot of those conversations over many years will.
Yes.
And it's not just that one time. It's many, 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 many times that you do that have that positive effect that you have. But listening to the students and looking at the task analysis, that piece, there's so much great work by Alfie Kohn and others about, if you, number one thing you can do is look at specifically what tasks they're being asked to do and how are they engaging in that task. Do they know how to do that task? Do they want to do that task? Do they find it meaningful or relevant or in any way engaging to their lives? Because if they don't, most likely anybody are going to have some misconduct or distraction or off-task behavior. So, it's easy to blame the kid for everything. And sometimes it is their fault. But even if it's their fault, why are they likely to do that again? It's really about the next time, right? Because sometimes we get these situations, it's almost too late then. It's really about the next time we get into it again. How can we adjust that? Because even if you adjust one little piece, it could make a little bit of a difference going forward. So, again, it's not blaming teachers. Teachers are working really, really hard, and they're getting grief, and they're getting kids doing really tough stuff right now. But at the end of the day, all we can control are our own actions. And like I talk about in this book, it's really about owning our own decisions. And, once we do that, and once we realize that, this whole discipline aspect is almost like what we would want as adults. Like, when they talk about discipline as adults, what do they say? They say things like having the picture of The Rock doing bench press. And like, if you just stay focused and motivated, you'll have success. You have people that coach you and that give you grace and that motivate you and uplift you. That's what discipline looks like. And that's what we want for adults.
Yep.
But when we have kids that mess up, it often gets back into punishment and consequences and beating down on them. And it's like, that's not going to work. It wouldn't work for us, because you know what happened for us? If someone does that to us, oh, you'd probably, you probably fight them, right? You'd probably like throw in some haymakers and swear words at them, because that's what adults do. Because look at adults right now. Adults are having some terrible behavior out there. And that's what our kids are doing. They're emulating that as well. So really thinking about, going back to asking them why they're doing what they're doing, and try to look at the task analysis, look at the environment that they're in, look at their schedule. That's one thing, see in the middle school versus literally secondary level versus elementary level. Elementary level, you have kids a lot of times in the same classroom, you're trying to see that kind of relationship with the teacher. But the secondary level, you have kids bouncing between classes, potentially 3, 4, 5, 7 times a day. Yeah. And so look at their schedule. And why does everyone have to have the same schedule, especially if that schedule's not working? God forbid we actually change something up. We always talk about thinking outside the box, and yet still we struggle with changing things up for kids that really need it. So task analysis, talking to the child, building that relationship, and looking at the environment are really key things.
You're bringing up a lot of good things, and you brought up something earlier about having the same old punishment or consequences for a student. And I know, when you're looking at a discipline matrix, it typically says detention, ISS, OSS. So, if we're taking those off the table, what are some other strategies that schools can use to help teach students the correct behavior?
Yeah, and I want to first say, because when I get into this, a lot of people say, okay, I can never do that ever again. Well, first of all, it's not practical. I mean,
No.
that's not real. I'm in a school right now and it happens. I'm just saying, right?
Mine too.
I'm against out of school suspension, but I've done it and I still do it because there is a reality to the world we live in. Maybe at some point we'll have better options. One of my frustration is we do need better options. And if you don't have those better options, you can't use them. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to say stop one thing, but you can't just stop. That's the one thing I learned from my teachers. And it was really this, is you can't just say to do nothing. You have to say to do something instead.
Correct.
So if you don't have those things in place, you're going to struggle with just no suspensions or anything like that. And especially with some of the violent behavior you get into, there is a reality. Even like if I really came back to, for me, the line was, if you look at like IDEA, which is Individuals with Disability Education Act. And for me, I really, my heart's in special education so much for a lot of different reasons. Even in IDEA, it talks about 3 reasons why you could do exclusionary discipline. And that's the big 3, which is drugs, weapons, and serious violence. And I'm not talking about disrespect, right? I'm talking about the big 3. Those are still legitimate reasons why you're trying to keep a school safe. And at times you may need to have students away from each other, right? So let's take that off the plate, because so many times we talk about discipline, we say, okay, what happens when another kid sucker punches a kid and then starts a mob fight against them? Like, well, yeah, but that's like one end of the extreme. But so much of our discipline is the day-to-day little things that drive us bananas. And that's where we then have to dig into what do we do instead. One, it goes back to what I said earlier, is how does our instruction look? What can we control? I can control the way my environment, my classroom feels. I can control the actual lessons. In fact, students have zero control in the class, which is why they always fight for that control. Mm-hmm. And frankly, they don't really want your control. They just want their own, right? They don't want your power. They're not trying to take it from you and like have you sit in the corner. They just want to feel their own sense of empowerment. And frankly, they have it whether they realize it or not. It's just your job to sort of unlock it, because innately, I feel like all of us have this power and this sense of entitlement, not in a bad way, but in our right to have our sort of own pathways in our lives, our own journey. And we have to sort of unlock that and help them own actually more of it, so that they can take more ownership in their learning, which half the time kids struggle. They just throw all that aside. I don't care. I don't want anything to do with it. And then once they have that apathy, that is killer. Apathy is a killer. Yeah. So really try to look at that environment, try and look at the instruction, and then building that relationship. It's all about relationships, everything. And I know everyone by now is sick of hearing it, but it's true. When you finally connect with a student and they care about you, they will listen to you more. That's true for any adult as well. If you have a boss and you hate your boss, you're not going to listen to anything they say, right? I mean, so it's on all of us to make sure that we are trying to connect with people and relate to people, restore relationships. If we have something that's not working, instead of just fighting through that relationship and fight, we have to stop, be more vulnerable, have those I statements. We all learned, maybe when we first got married or something, like one of those, marriage counselors, right when you start getting married, they like teach you these things, the I statements. Well, don't ask my wife. If she's listening to this, she'll probably say, well, Andy, when are you going to use that for our homework? Right? No, but all those things that we learn about how to do with adults, we do for students too. And, really, really making sure that we have those things in place, check in, check out, 2x10s, take 10s, taking things off the stage, not doing things in front of students, never losing the integrity of the child, never put down the child, never have a sense of power and yelling at the child. You're going to lose them every single time. But at the same time, don't get me wrong, you need clear expectations. You have consistent rules and norms across the school, because when they're confusing to you, when they're confusing to the adults, they'll definitely be confusing to kids. So making sure that the rules are consistent and that you have buy-in from your staff, and then ultimately have buy-in from your students, so that students can also have voice and some choice as to what rules are. And right now we have all these sort of norms that we feel are so important. And are they really that important? And are they worth fighting on? I mean, right now is masks for COVID, but before that, it's hats, and now it's cell phones and hoods and all these things. And I'm not saying that we should or should not have any of them. Frankly, I could make an argument for either one. But what do the kids care about? What do you care about? What does your staff care about? Because the more that you can find that common consensus among all of them, the more natural buy-in you're going to have by the majority of students. And then once you start whittling those issues down to just the several instead of the several hundred, then you really see your staff and your school take off and enjoy their experience a lot more. So they're not fighting these issues all the time.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Well, Andy, I'm going to pivot from the book, which is fantastic. If anyone is listening right now, definitely pick up Discipline Win. I'm going to have a link in the show notes for anyone to pick that up. It's fantastic and such a relevant topic right now. But I am going to pivot to another project, which I love also, your podcast. It's not even a year old, I don't think, but where did that come from? What was the process? Like, did you have a struggle pushing record? I know I did, but I want to know about you.
Oh yeah. My first one. Yes. My first one literally is the problem with perfection. Shout out to Adam Welcome, because he really pushed me on that just to get it out there. And I was debating with him on something. He says, just do it.
Yep.
And he was right. And so, I honestly, I wanted to, when you write any book, you could put a million things in it. And this book is just one of many different amazing discipline resources that are out there, and buy them all and learn from them all, frankly. And for me, it's like the more I learned and the more I discuss it, the more I want to share it and keep that dialogue open and going and growing myself. So half of it's reflective. I try to be a little bit inspirational on this tough topic, but then also it's interviewing, just like you're doing, just trying to interview people out there and see what they have to say on it. And then you never know which of those will be sort of gold and which of those will be something that one person listens to and really changes their day or changes their belief system. So just like you're doing, just try to put good word out there.
That's awesome. So I'll have a link for their podcast also. And I want to talk about a couple more projects, because there's a couple other things that you're passionate about, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but you have a virtual talent show coming up, and I want to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I work with, I guess I'm a board of directors for the Autism Society of Northern Virginia. We help support thousands and thousands of families affected by autism in the region, and we do a lot of cool events. And my wife and I put on this massive fun fest and walk and all that in the fall. But in the spring, April is Autism Acceptance Month, not just awareness, but acceptance. And one of the ways to accept our students is to put them on stage. And during the COVID experience, we started a virtual talent show where people could submit, autistic individuals could submit their talents, and everything from dancing to singing to playing piano to someone was juggling flaming batons or something like that. It's great. And I organized them all into like a show, and we have our board of directors makes comments like American Idol or something, except not negative. And we don't have a Simon Cowell on the show, but and we just go through and we highlight those individuals. And for them, it's really cool because a regular talent show, being on stage is stimulation overload, and it's very anxiety driven. If you know a lot about autism or not, it's not just the sensory, touching things that people always have the trouble with. It's anxiety. There's so many anxiety issues with autism for those that have autism. And so we want to create something that would reduce that anxiety, and people can watch from their homes with their families. And it's really popular. So we're putting that on in April.
Oh, that's awesome. So last project, NAESP. And you talked about it earlier, connecting in authentic ways. I loved what you said there. So what is it with that organization that you love to do, and how are you connecting other leaders?
Yes, National Association of Elementary School Principals and all the state affiliates. School leadership is so hard. It's so difficult. And that's not a knock on any teaching position or anything else. Those are so difficult too. And they all need their associations as well. In this case, I'm proud to work with NASP to connect, to inspire, and to educate school leaders across the country, and really, frankly, the world, because we connect with worldwide organizations with this.
Yeah.
And that comes in many different ways, because many people have their unique preferences on how to engage, and at the end of the day, though, we have to stay connected, because while you and I are having this great conversation, you may have someone that feels extremely lonely and they have no one to reach out to. And the leadership role can be an island where you feel like everyone is throwing, darts at you and you have no one to turn to. And everyone needs that friend they can rely on. And if we can create that venue for support, especially in a time like that, I think that for some people that keeps them in the job, and it helps help them be a better, for me, NESP made me such a better school leader. And the friendships and partnerships I've made through them have just been lifelong changes. So I'm happy to help do that in the same way.
Yeah. So I'll put a link in the show notes again for that. I think, Andy, you make a really great point about making connections and relationships with other leaders. I know leadership can be an extremely lonely job, and it's so important to make sure that you have other people to help support you, and NAESP can definitely do that for you. Andy, I'm going to leave you with the last question of, for our aspiring leaders that are looking to enhance their leadership journey, what is something that they can do tomorrow or next week?
Oh, time management. Schedule your time according to your beliefs and your priorities. So at the end of the day, you control your schedule way more than you realize. And you may feel like, everyone else owns me, but, you have to run your day or else the day is going to run you. And if you're letting all these little things own your space, well, then you're really not taking advantage of the control that you do have and where you spend your time. And so, for instance, if I want to be really diligent about getting in classrooms, giving growth producing feedback, and engaging in really tough instructional conversations, well, then right away, make sure you block up your whole time doing that, and block up your time doing the little things like having the post-conference meeting, right? Because a lot of times we don't put that in our schedule. We just put the observation or whatever it's going to be, spending time in the hallways, reaching out to parents, doing good news calls. And, I really stress that if you're going to have the tough things in your job, like discipline that we talked about, you do have to have that. It's going to happen. You can't not do those things, but you can't only do those tough things. You have to also do the positive things that keep you in a positive mind frame and a positive mindset, so that when the tough things come, it doesn't just crush you. So do the things you want to do and do the things you have to do. Look at that schedule, prioritize it, make it happen. You can control it. You could do it. And once you do, you look at the end of the day and think, man, I did some good stuff today. Feel good about myself.
Yeah. So Andy, for those who are looking to make a connection with you and learn more about all the fantastic things that you're doing, how can they connect with you on social media?
Yeah, at Twitter _AndyJax, Instagram, same thing, _AndyJax. My website, andyjax.com. And then just keep the conversation going. I think social media is a tough time right now because a lot of negativity. So we need people out there spreading the good word. It's not toxic positivity. It's a mindset. It's a sort of philosophy of and a belief that this will get better. And I truly believe it will. I think we're on the cusp of getting, I don't want to say back to normal because I think there's no such thing, but I think we're on the cusp of people getting to a place where like, all right, now I'm getting more positive momentum and good things are happening. People are coming back together. And before you know it, we're going to be sharing all this awesome stuff and it'll just be exciting again. So you just got to be part of that online.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So Andy, your dedication to education was shown tonight because as we're recording, the national championship game is occurring.
I know. Oh, I don't know if I lost my, athletic card or whatever you want to call it, my sports fan card, I think a little bit here.
That's right, man. You're serving in so many ways and it shows tonight. And I just appreciate not only what you're doing on your campus, but what you're doing around the world. And your book is fantastic. Podcast is fantastic. You're just doing so much amazing work. And it's just an honor to speak with you this evening.
Vice versa, my man. Vice versa. You're doing great work as well. So keep sharing this stuff. I'm proud of you. This is hard I know on my end, to pull people in and get all these things going. People don't realize, they just think you hit record and just magically all happens. But the work you're doing is really profound and you're sharing a lot of great, awesome stuff out there. So thank you as well.